This episode's made possible by Planful.
Hi, this is Anisha Sood, CFO and Chief Strategy Officer of First Choice Health, and you are listening to the CFO Thought Leader Podcast.
Hi, it's Jack. We hope you're enjoying Labor Day weekend. We have a bonus replay for you featuring one of our listener favorites from the last 12 months.
The one thing that I'm really excited to move forward with in the company is bringing subscription economics. I am a huge believer in a SaaS company that you really need to look at CAC, lifetime revenue. Those are really, really important metrics, and they need to be part of the decision-making process for investments. And we're at a stage, right? We're at an inflection point right now where we can start bringing those in as we become multi-product. We're expanding internationally, looking at the economics, the subscription economics of each of those businesses, and help make the business make effective decisions. And so I think that's the next evolution of where we're going to be, and really excited to go on this journey.
Hi, it's Jack. On today's episode, we speak with Evan Goldstein, CFO of Seismic. Years ago, at the end of a long day, after a week of long days, Evan Goldstein tells us he was on the way to his office building's parking lot when he received a gut punch. Goldstein found himself walking alongside one of his young reports and decided there was no time like the present to thank him for all the hard work he had put forth lately. However, instead of receiving a welcome in return, the employee turned to Goldstein and replied, "Well, I don't think I want to do this any longer." The employee further explained that Goldstein had been telling him what to do instead of allowing him to figure things out on his own. For Goldstein, that reply became a turning point from a managerial leadership perspective for his career. Evan Goldstein explains why and much more on today's episode. We begin after this.
Hi, I'm Rowan Tonkin, Chief Marketing Officer at Planful, and we're a proud sponsor of CFO Thought Leader. At Planful, we're empowering teams just like yours to drive peak financial performance in every corner of your business. What sets Planful apart? We have purpose-built applications for every department, from FP&A to accounting, marketing to HR, all with built-in financial intelligence. This means we can get you up and running within weeks, and it requires minimal IT involvement. So you can rapidly and seamlessly engage everyone across the business in your key financial processes. Best of all, you can't outgrow us. We take the pain of growing away with an unmatched ability to scale with you. You have an endless runway with Planful. See why over 1,300 customers around the world choose Planful as their flexible, user-friendly, end-to-end financial performance management platform. Go to planful.com and see how you can make financial performance a team sport in your business.
Hello, we're speaking with Evan Goldstein, CFO of Seismic. Evan, welcome.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Looking forward to the conversation.
I don't want to tip your hand. We're going to ask you for those career-building moments that you've had, but I just want to mention up front here to the audience that Evan has two very impressive chapters, both with different companies that you will know, Genentech and Salesforce, both 10 years, Salesforce actually 11, I believe, but side by side. So if you go back, turn back the clock for the first 2 decades of the century, he was at Genentech and Salesforce, climbed those finance organizations and had all sorts of interesting projects. I'm going to let you explain it, Evan, but I just think it's kind of an unusual career ladder that we don't see every day. So just two really interesting companies as well. So with that, if I haven't built things up too much, Evan, if you wouldn't mind, take a look back for us and tell us what were those experiences along the way that you feel prepared you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first off, I do believe my background's a little bit unique. I refer to myself as a serial monogamist when it comes to my professional career, having spent 10 years at Genentech and then 11 years at Salesforce. And really the longevity of both of those companies come down to three things. First, the people. I want to work in an organization that challenges me and they want to be challenged. Two, can I rally behind the company mission? I mean, I think Genentech is pretty straightforward. They were trying to cure cancer. But Salesforce was trying to enable the end customers and using technology in a different way. And so really, I want to be excited about what the mission is. And I'd say the third thing is the importance of innovation. And I think sometimes people second guess the role of innovation when it comes to finance. And I'm not talking about how to interpret accounting standards or things like that. I'm really talking about how do we help the company make better decisions, right? Whether it's through strategic planning or option analysis, lots of different ways that finance can be innovative. And thankfully, both of those companies provided those opportunities for many, many years. In terms of some of the career experiences that I felt best prepared me to be a CFO, I'd really go back to my Genentech years. I was super fortunate to have some amazing mentors and leaders while I was there. Again, going back to the importance of people and why I stayed for as long as I did. So I'll go through sort of three stories. The first one was I was fairly early in my career. I would say in my early to mid 20s. And as background on me, I'm originally from New York. I'm definitely type A. If you look at my background, I'm definitely looking how to move forward in my career. And I think when you're early in your career, and this is a conversation I have a lot with the people that have worked for me at that point in their career, they're really focused on their self, right? You know, how do you get promoted next? Getting promoted every 2 years. They're really more inward focusing. And I had a wonderful mentor that kind of sat me down and level set me a little bit when I was a little too focused on that. He was originally from Taiwan. He spent some time in the Taiwanese military, and he really drilled into me the importance of company, team, self in that order. And it's definitely a mantra that I've carried forward with me through the years. I think it's very common in military, you know, shipmate, self, I think. But if you're not in the military, you don't see the importance of that in a company organization. And that was a really important pivot point to me where I was focused less on, you know, when is the next time I'm going to get promoted versus are the decisions I'm making for the right thing for the company first, the team second, and third myself. And after that, the promotions just sort of came because I was really focused on how do I evolve the company? How do I help the company? How do I help my teammates? How do I help the leaders? And that was a pretty massive turning point in my career. I look back now, that's almost 20 years ago. And it was just a really key moment. The second was also sort of my time during Genentech was understanding the language of the business. I think, again, when you're early in your career and you're a finance professional, you want to master the numbers, right? You know, how many slide decks do we see with lots of numbers on the screen, you know? And I remember presenting a series of numbers to our head of finance at the time. And I was going through, you know, variant budget versus actuals analysis, like you always do early in your career. And he kept asking me why. I said, well, contract spend is less this quarter than last quarter. I said, why? And he said, why? And I said, well, budget and that, you know, we're spending a little less. And he's like, why? And like he went on and he was trying to prove a point with me. The point is not what's happening in the numbers, but what are the business drivers behind that? And what are the implications of that? So instead of talking, you know, we're underspending in a given quarter, we'll talk about why. You know, we didn't have the contract in time, or, you know, the project's delayed. And then the next step of that is, well, what is the implication of that? Will there be a delay in revenue, or will there be a delay in other spend? Really understanding the business. And I think that is one of the key parts of being a finance professional. One of the things that I love, you know, we have a 360-degree view of the company, and that is very rare. And so how do you leverage that? And how do you really understand the business? And that influenced a lot about how I engage with business partnering. It shaped my philosophy on business partnering, the importance of being objective, the importance of understanding the business, the importance of understanding the question rather than sort of being that budget police, which a lot of people frame finance people in. Because I think there's a lot more that finance can add rather than that. And then I would say, my third story is my first managerial experience. And it was not, it was a tough experience at first to lay out the story. We had just had a pretty successful deliverable. We presented to the leadership team. As context, I had just been promoted to a manager. I had taken over short-term planning in the corporate organization. I had hired someone, and I had his role. So I basically had gotten promoted. And so I was backfilling myself. And we had a great deliverable. It was a great success. This employee was just doing phenomenally well. We're walking out to the parking lot. And I said, hey, thank you for all your hard work. And he's like, yeah, I don't think I want to do this. And it was sort of a gut punch, right? We had this really successful outcome. It was my first experience as a manager walking through a deliverable. And he basically said, Evan, you're telling me what to do. You're not letting me figure out what to do. And I think, again, when you're a first-time manager, you're so focused on success. You're so focused. And I think, having been in his job before, I felt that I knew everything that needed to be done. And that's just a fallacy. The effective way to manage people is, again, aligning on what those deliverables are, but yet let them grow and develop. Let them add their flavor to the process. And I think for me, again, that was one of those turning points from a managerial leadership perspective where, you start to realize it's not just about what you deliver, but it's about how you deliver. They're both very, very important. And definitely key moments in my career. Like I said, all of those happened at Genentech while working for some amazing people, and just really fortunate to have those experiences that helped influence how I've evolved as a leader.
Yeah, great examples for us, and particularly I like the last one where it was someone who reported to you, who who wasn't a mentor talking down. It was someone talking up.
Yeah, it's interesting. That individual actually went to the same university that I did. We had a lot of friends in common. I didn't know him, and I thought it was going to be great, and it was going to be right out the gate. And again, I think it's the importance. Well, yes, we had similar backgrounds. He was very different. And it's about understanding the differences of your team and how do you elicit the best responses, the best outcomes, whether they're an introvert or an extrovert, internal processor, verbal processor versus internal processor. How do you maximize each person? And really starting after that, I always really push to have diversity of style on my teams. I am a type A, ENTJ, I'm Myers-Briggs. I'm self-aware of what I am, but I don't want autonomy on my team. I want people to push and challenge me with different approaches. And I think that's the way you build the best team and you get the best outcomes for an organization.
So again, what's interesting, I think, as well, is that you were with these two world-class organizations for as long as you were, 10 years. I mean, very often we'll see 4 or 5 years that a person makes an investment of years with a company. But it would seem to me after 10 years, you really understand the company's culture, the people. You have so many relationships within those companies that to make this change that you do make from one and we would suspect these are very different organizations. We know they're in different industries, clearly,
Yeah.
but maybe you would tell us otherwise. When it comes time to make this change, what are you looking for? What is it, and could you reflect a little on the change for us and share with us what you were thinking at the time?
Well, listen, I think the thing that's common in both of those companies, they were incredibly high growth companies. So I think I joined Genentech in 2001. I think it was doing about $1 billion in revenue when it was acquired by Roche Pharmaceuticals in 2009. I believe it was in the double digits. I joined Salesforce. It was about $3 billion, $4 billion. When I left, it was about $30 billion. So again, really high growth companies. And I love the energy of high growth. That's one of the things that really attracted me. I think I mentioned earlier the importance of people and the role that they play in those companies as well. So that's also very important to me. I view every career step that you make, and this is, again, what I counsel people that I've mentored through the years, is that you need to be thinking about what you're going to learn along the way. Both Genentech and Salesforce afforded me the opportunity with different experiences. I was either expanding my role or changing my role every 2 to 3 years in both of those situations. and learning new things. And so I have always had a career aspiration to be a CFO. That was sort of my goal. I'd always wanted to do that. I've always been fascinated by numbers and business models. And I always thought about, okay, what am I going to learn in the next step? How can I contribute back to the company in a different way? And for me, that was just sort of that natural evolution. My decision to leave Genentech, definitely not an easy one. I'd been there for a really long time. But I think, at the point of 10 years, you're ready for a change. I think there's just a moment in your time where you feel like, okay, I think I could try a new experience. Genentech had gotten much bigger over time. It had been acquired by Roche Pharmaceuticals. And for me, it's like I wanted to go into a smaller organization at the time, which Salesforce was. I was actually looking at the time for a late stage pre-IPO company because I've never had that experience. But I met the team at Salesforce, and it was just a click right away. I met my hiring manager. I met the leader of the group. I met my peers. It just felt right, and that sort of made me take that leap.
Interesting. And again, culturally, you said you kind of clicked. So I would say maybe there was some sort of cultural similarity. And again, it had to do with growth and mindset.
Yeah.
But anything
Well,
more?
I think it's more than that, right? It's about the values and what drives the company forward. And so when I think about Genentech, we were all about the patients. I remember Genentech was known at the time for having big concerts in their parking lots. If you're familiar with Genentech, we'd have these famous, we had Elton John in the parking lot. But before we even start the concert, the CEO would bring up patients, and the patients would talk to the crowd. And I just remember sitting there in a sea of people. These patients, they're not famous. They're not musicians. They're people that have benefited from the drugs that Genentech produced. And you could feel the energy build. It was like it was the glue of the company in many ways. And so really being focused on the patient and then being values-driven organization, right? I think Salesforce has a lot of similarities. Like we're all about the customer. If you listen to any of the keynotes at Dreamforce, or if you look at any of the marketing, it's always putting the customer at the center of everything. And that is really how they believe. And then on top of that, they're very clear on what the values are of the organization, and it's a aligning mechanism for the company. And so I think, being really focused on the end customer, whether it's patients or consumers of the technology, and then being a values-driven organization. I find that those are often rallying cries that align the company and really are great motivators for organizations.
You mentioned, and we'll jump forward here shortly, but you mentioned how during the course of your career at Genentech as well as Salesforce, it was 2 to 3 years, and you take on a new role. I just want to mention the last 3 roles you had at Salesforce. You were Senior Vice President of Corporate Planning, Finance, and Strategy. Next, you were Senior Vice President, Corporate Planning and Operations, Finance, and Strategy. The last 2.5 years, you were there Senior Vice President, Investor Relations, which is often the last stop before a CFO role for many of our guests. So, but just you got to the higher upper ranks there as a Senior Vice President. So just to jump forward, we may have a few more career-related questions for you during the mentoring round.
Sure.
But let's jump to our business segment of the podcast where we get to ask you about Seismic, the company you stepped into a CFO role in August of 2022, not too long ago.
Yeah, less than 2 months. Less than 2 months in seat.
So we're catching you during the first 100 days. But first, tell us about Seismic. What is this company? What does it do, and what are its offerings?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Seismic really started as a technology to handle customer-facing content management, really for enterprises and financial services firms. That was sort of the origin. But it quickly grew into a platform, okay? And it's more than just sort of managing content. It's about analytics and intelligence, buyer engagement, marketing orchestration, and more. It was enablement before enablement was a thing. I think now you hear a lot about enablement, but when the company was founded in 2010, there was no such thing. And Seismic is a huge part of creating that and defining that and growing it over the last decade and expanding its definition. Right now, it even includes training and coaching and enablement intelligence. And so it's really evolved that. And really what sales enablement is all about, it's about making the seller's life easier. It's providing them with the right skills, content, tools, and insights to grow and win. And when I was looking about my next step, and I was looking at a lot of different companies, 2 things really stood out for me. for Seismic. I think one is the evolution to a platform. If you look at some of the third-party Forrester and G2, we have best-in-class products at multiple parts of the enablement workflow, and we're continuing to push forward in other ways to build out that platform. The importance of platform versus sort of a niche product or a feature was really important to me as I looked at my next step, and I do believe Seismic is really, really unique in that, and there's a huge TAM opportunity. And then the other part that I think is also very unique for a company that's our size is that it's enterprise ready. A lot of our customers are in the enterprise, which in sort of economic uncertainty is helpful. And being an enterprise ready product, having enterprise customers really helps us have some best in class retention rates. And again, one of those things that really attracted me to the company.
Give us a abbreviated history of its capital structure.
Yeah, so we're late stage. We raised over $400 million, late stage pre-IPO company. We've announced that we're doing about $300 million in revenue, which basically puts us at the largest in the sales enablement category by a healthy amount.
And what is it that and again, you've only stepped into the role 60 days ago, but we're curious as to already what are the numbers that you're looking at every day? What are you paying attention to?
Yeah, so obviously we're a SaaS company, ARR, bookings, gross retention, and net revenue retention. And I looked at all of those things as part of the due diligence process of joining Seismic, and I was really pleased with what those numbers are. We've talked about the $300 million already. We haven't disclosed any of those other pieces yet, but really that's the health of the business. So that's the very top level. Then, you dig down into the details, right? You look at customer mix. As I said earlier, where a good portion of our business is enterprise, right? Enterprise versus SMB, small, medium business. You take a look at cash flows, how those are performing, what the cash balance is, what the burn rate is, what all those different things are. And so we look at a lot of those types of metrics and try and understand the health of the business. The one thing that I'm really excited to move forward with in the company is bringing subscription economics. I am a huge believer in a SaaS company that you really need to look at CAC, lifetime revenue. Those are really, really important metrics, and they need to be part of the decision-making process for investments. And we're at a stage where we're at an inflection point right now where we can start bringing those in as we become multi-product. We're expanding internationally, looking at the economics, the subscription economics of each of those businesses, and help make the business make effective decisions. And so I think that's the next evolution of where we're going to be, and really excited to go on this journey.
So just in some of our recent discussions, we've been having interesting talks around data integrity, whether the data is clean and whether the data is what we think it is a concern as you're new in an organization and step into a new role. Just curious if you've introduced yourself to I'm sure you have, the data team, the data scientists, the analytics team, if they feed into the finance function in some way or connect in what way. Is it the correct way? Is it is that a relationship you'll be looking to keep robust, obviously?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. As you look to go public, you're going to be sharing a lot of that data. There are going to be disclosures, and they're going to have to be audited financials or audited business metrics. And so the sanctity of that data, the integrity of that data is paramount. No question about it. And it's definitely something I learned during my tenures at both Genentech and Salesforce, is the importance of the data. And I think, again, a natural evolution when a company goes from a scrappy 5-10 person before they have product market fit to now they have product market fit and they have this great trajectory that Seismic is on. There's an evolution of where that is. Again, I felt really good. As I said, I'm 2 months into the job, but it's part of my due diligence. I dug into a lot of that data and I felt really good about where we're at. But, data is always, it's always a journey for me. It's like, okay, what is the best way to describe the business? How do we use that data to tell the story of Seismic? I spent a lot of time in my lab, and I learned a lot of that from my 3 years at investor relations at Salesforce. We every year did our investor day, and we would take a look at the data, and we would see, okay, how can we tell an interesting story that could give an insight to our investors of what's going on? And so during my tenure there, I introduced cohort analysis of how companies grew with us, how they went from single SKU to multi SKU, or what their overall spend increased over that time. And so using that data to tell a really powerful story. And so, of course, definitely going to be looking into a lot of that, but I feel comfortable. We're going to make some tweaks, we're going to make some changes, but that's nothing out of the ordinary for me.
Sales enablement to a CFO, they're sort of off to the side. It's like the chief revenue officer often. Would he be your target? And the CFO is kind of like off to the side. I don't know. What
I'm gonna challenge this initial concept that finance shouldn't be engaged in, like, it's a conflict between, yes, there is a natural tension between the financial organization and the sales organization, right? Sales want to retire quota, finance want to make sure that whatever they close translates to revenue. But I'm a big believer that the G&A organizations more broadly, not just finance, but I'm talking about finance, legal, HR, we're enablers of growth. We need to help the company be successful. And so in the example that you're talking about, the importance of revenue recognition, the importance of the rules of revenue recognition for the company. We need to be aligned on what those are. It shouldn't be a surprise if a deal gets rejected because it violates one of the rules. Those guidelines need to be issued, they need to be published, they need to be discussed with the sales leaders, right? So fundamentally, I'm a big believer in the goal of G&A organizations and finance is to partner with the business to drive growth. I'm a very growth-focused CFO, I'd say, and that's just the nature, as I said, of the two companies that I've been at. Especially when the TAMs are significant, and I do believe that for Seismic. When it comes to the software, particularly when Seismic, the product the platform that we have, what are we trying to do? We're trying to drive growth, right? We want to empower sellers faster. And at the same time, we want to help drive productivity. So from a CFO perspective, those are two very, very important things. And things that you're looking at ramp times, deal closure metrics, all of those types of things. And if I can find a piece of software that can do that, I'm going to be very interested in that as a CFO, right? I'm all about growth. But at the same time, you need to have profitable growth, right? You see what's going on in the markets today. It's not growth at all costs anymore. And so if we have the technology that can help the sales organization be more efficient, and whatever that sales organization be, we're focused a little bit more on sort of the traditional account executive, but the applications of investment banking and asset management, really any selling organization, that is really, really powerful and a compelling use case for a CFO. And when I spoke to a lot of people before I joined the company, I spoke to a lot of people in the different sales organizations. They just love this product and they see the benefit and success of it. And then when I talked to some of my mentors that have been CFOs for many years, they told me the same thing. And that's what we're seeing in the business.
Is sales enablement, is it impacting the rules, sort of those traditional rules of revenue recognition? Is it sales enablement encouraging a more enlightened set of rules of revenue recognition, or is it influencing it?
I don't think so. I think the rules of revenue recognition should be set regardless of whatever technology you use. I mean, that's a conversation, with your audit partner, with your accounting organization, and what those should be. I think those are, interpreting the rules of FASB, what they laid forward, especially with 606, which I think clarified a lot of things. So, I don't think so. Really, what enablement technology is, it's about empowering the sales organization in a lot of different ways. I talked a little bit earlier, it's about the access to content. It's the right skills. It's the right insights, and at the end of the day, at scale in a go-to-market organization, enablement helps businesses engage their customers. It's aligning the sales organization, the marketing organization, and the operations organization. That's the true power. I view the need of revenue recognition. That's just the role of finance and how it plays.
Might be interesting in a year or so to just ask you this question, but how you might have deployed your FP&A people differently than than how the organization operates today. Again, you've only been there 60 days, but curious, as you look at using your FP&A experts, do you have some ideas there? Do you have some notions of what you'd like to see and how to use them and maybe do it a little differently? Don't know.
Yeah, I mean, again, like I said, I'm still 60 days in. I'm assessing the organization. I think the team here is phenomenal. And that's, again, one of the compelling reasons I came. I did lengthy reviews with the finance organization. And I just think they're the caliber of talent, the opportunity across the board, really consistent. I think as you grow as an organization, FP&A becomes a more critical part of decision making. I think sometimes when you're smaller, it's a little bit, hey, you're throwing spaghetti on the wall a little bit, sort of innovations dilemma, like kind of pushing, and you're trying to find that product market fit. Where I feel the role that FP&A can play is helping make effective decisions. I talked a little bit earlier about subscription economics and how we use that. It's this evolution in FP&A when you're early in your career, you're sort of like order takers versus, true business partners, helping them make decisions, being the mini CFO of the function or organization that you support and getting a seat at that table, earning a seat at that table, right? And so I think that's a natural evolution of the company. I think that's where I want the FP&A organization to go. I want the head of the functional areas to be like, oh, let's check in with finance on what their mindset is on that. And that business acumen, it really comes down to that 360-degree view of the company. Again, finance is so unique of an organization. Whether you're in corporate finance or one of the functional finance, you have insight in what's going on in the business that very few people have in a company. And how do you leverage that knowledge to help the company be successful? How do you help it grow? How do you help it be productive? And that's what I look for in an FP&A organization. And I'm looking forward to seeing what the Seismic organization can do.
Curious, we want to just touch on quickly talent with you. Again, in an organization this size, much smaller than the companies you were part of, losing a key hire or attrition rates are you feel the hires all the more when you lose someone or you're unable to attract someone. What would you can you share some of your talent mindset and whether it's a priority for you to help the company understand better the workforce dynamics that are out there today?
Absolutely. Well, let's just start with the dynamics that are going on, because I feel like the last 3 years with the start of the pandemic have been really fascinating, from the Great Resignation to, the really decentralized workforce model that has empowered us to manage people differently. There's a lot of complexities around that. And while those, you have to adjust to those things, I think there's a couple of core things that I look for in talent. I am definitely of the mindset of the best athlete when it comes to, finance and organization broadly, not just FP&A, but broadly. I'm a big believer in the best athlete. And part of being the best athlete is curiosity. It's the number one thing that I look for in an interview process, and it's a really hard thing to ferret out. It's not an easy, and I'm not always successful at it, but I encourage my team to think about that. I can teach someone how to use Excel. I can teach someone how to use PowerPoint. I can teach them how to communicate, but if they don't have the innate curiosity, which you cannot teach, you can't learn all those things. They're not going to have the drive to learn all of those things. And so, during the interview process, I always ensure to allocate a significant amount of time for them to ask me questions. And how do they ask me questions? What's their line of thinking? I'll tell a story. When I was hiring for a senior financial analyst in a long-range planning team, I was looking for a certain mold. This is a model-heavy organization, right? I wanted someone who was likely a former investment banker that has that modeling expertise with these beautiful, crisp models. And we interviewed an individual, and this person probably asked me the best questions I've ever been asked in an interview. It was just like her line of thinking and her thoughtfulness and how my answers drove the next ones, and it opened up another door for her, and how she asked all those questions. I was completely blown away, and I was like, okay, well, she might not be the right fit for this job, but we need to hire her. And so I kind of just said, I talked to my manager at the time. He was the deputy CFO. I'm like, hey, can you please interview this candidate? And I didn't tell him how my feedback on this individual. And I want to hear what he had to say. And so he goes to the interview. He's like, I don't care where we put her, but we are hiring this individual. You don't have people that have that sort of innate curiosity. I ended up hiring her for that long range role. But like I said, I sent her out for Excel training. We just armed her with the right tools. And once you put those like little nuggets out there, then they run. And that is really, and that person had an incredibly successful career with me. And then they've gone on to do great things at Salesforce after that. And so that's just one of the things that I look for really in talent. It's really that curiosity, and really thinking about the best athlete rather than, a very like, I want this profile. I think that's easier to do earlier in your career. I think as you get a little bit, obviously you're hiring more senior people, you want some experience. But, I've had great success hiring people from consulting into FP&A roles or banking into FP&A roles or whatever it is. A wide range. Like that individual I was talking about came from audit. She was doing SOX auditing, right? Very different than long range strategic planning. So
a hidden gem. Thank you for that. We're going to jump to what we refer to as our finance strategic moment. And this might have happened anytime during the course of your career. Might have happened the last 60 days, might have happened the first decade, second decade. Don't know. Evan, what would you share with us as far as a finance strategic moment?
Yeah, for me, it was about the time that I took over the long range planning process at Salesforce. And just as some context, prior to that, Salesforce was really in a stage of rapid growth. We were evolving from a single product, single geo to a multi-SKU global company. It was a really transition point. And up until that time, the long range plan was sort of a finance skunkworks project. It was this big, heavy duty model that, a couple of people in the corner of the finance floor of our building in downtown San Francisco managed. It wasn't business owned. And when the leader left and I took over this, all the business folks walked away from the model. Like, that's not always numbers. That's the finance model. That's the finance LRP. It's not my numbers. And it made me quickly realize the importance, again, going back to some of those early lessons I shared about Genentech, the importance of the business and engaging with the business. The importance that the long range plan is not just a model. The model is the output. It's a framework of how to have a conversation. But really, it's about the strategic alignment of your go-to-market organization, your product organization, and operations. And operations can be anything from tech delivery to recruiting to finance, all of those things. And it's really about, at the very top of the organization, being aligned on where we're going over the next 2 to 5 years, or sometimes longer. Genentech had very long LRPs that were greater than 10 years because of the nature of that business. But technology, call it 2 to 5, depending where you are. And for me, that was, when I took that over, that was sort of my goal. I didn't want this to be a finance exercise. It needed to be a company exercise. And how I was able to do that was really partnership in the organization. I reached out to the head of sales strategy at the time and I said, hey, do you have a need for a long range plan? Would a long range plan help you in running your business? And he's like, absolutely. This is the thing I need. Every year, I sort of start over with territory carving and quotas. It'd be great to know, like, okay, what geos are going to be focal points? What product selling are going to be focal points? And he's like, okay, this will be really help me. So he joined me on this sort of LRP journey. And then he challenged me and he's like, you know what? I think we really need a product person. And so we reached out to the head of product strategy, and we had all worked together before and we knew each other really well. But really, this is the first time we had come together as sort of a collective to make something that was company driven in this level. And so the product strategy, what's the product roadmap? How do we align product and sales strategy and all those things? Because when you're in a really fast growing company, it is incredibly natural to have silos. It is perfectly normal. And it's really, in many ways, how do you connect? How do you build that connective tissue? And I view the LRP as doing that. And the teams came together and we built out a process, a multi-month process where we start with the top line, then we go into resource allocation, and the final output is a model. But what I was most pleased with about that are the decisions that we made that came out of that long-range planning. Whether it was data center locations, right, as we saw businesses grow in certain areas, and getting our chief revenue officer aligned with our chief technology officer on where we should make those bets, or whether it was a decision to move into a new market, a new product that we thought had a ton of upside and opportunity. And that product ended up being one of the fastest growing businesses in Salesforce's history, right? It's one of a great success story. That is the strategic moment for finance, right? It's evolving us from the number crunchers, the budget managers, to enabling the company to make really effective decisions. And, finance is not alone in that. Like I said, I had partners in that journey, but it was a great success. Now, it's not to say that it wasn't without faults. We had bumps during that process. But again, going back to what motivates me to stay at a company, do we have innovation? And every year we evolve that long-range planning process. We did surveys afterwards, what worked, what didn't work. How do we evolve that next? What piece of information would our executives like to have gleaned from that? And so we just kept evolving that. And, when it was under my ownership, I probably did it for about 5 years. And every year it was slightly different, slightly improved. And that's the goal, right? To constantly help the company make effective decisions. And so definitely one of my proudest achievements and one of where I saw the use case of where finance can really be a strategic business partner to an organization and the role that finance can play.
Hello and welcome to 60-second stories from CFO Thought Leader. Looking back, CFO Ravi Narula tells us that he wishes he had become a servant leader sooner in his career. Servant leadership. That style of leadership that deems the number one goal of leaders is to serve others. Narula tells us, if we had asked him 15 years ago whether he was a servant leader, his answer would have to have been no. In fact, it was only after attending a graduate executive program that explored leadership styles that Narula says he fully realized the impact servant leaders can make on company culture. Today, Narula credits the leadership approach with helping him advance down the CFO path. That story and much more on episode number 867 featuring Ravi Narula, CFO of Financial Force. Remember, the future of finance is listening.
Hi, it's Jack. I hope you're enjoying our discussion with CFO Evan Goldstein of Seismic. I just wanted to point out that you might recall at the very start of our discussion with Evan, he pointed out that there were 3 aspects of business that were responsible for his longevity with the companies he built his career at. They were the people, the mission, and the innovation, and the powerful professional narrative that he put forth in response to our questions. He touched on those 3 elements again and again and again. Just as always, we didn't have a long time together, but he made the most of our time. It's about people, mission, and innovation. Now back to our interview. We're going to jump to our mentoring round. I'm sorry we're running a little long. Usually here I ask if you could go back to that first 60 days you stepped into a CFO role, what would be your advice to yourself? So I don't know if that's going to work here. I was thinking, the thing about someone like you who did the time, like you were a monogamist, as you said, career builder, which you were. There had to have been a time, though. A recruiter was, you were on their speed dial. They were trying to get you out. There was an opportunity that you maybe gave a little more consideration to than others.
No.
I don't want you to be specific, but what is it that kept you there that time? Ultimately, what was it that time? And I know I could give you lots of, okay, Evan's going to tell us it was just the opportunities were still there at that company. But there was something more.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, there's a couple of things, right? And I've talked about this again, the importance of people, the mission, and is the company innovative? And, there was an opportunity where I thought about, I really contemplated leaving. But, it fits some of those things. But in many ways, the role that I was looking at was really just a growth in FP&A, right? It was a continuing my path of FP&A. And, when I thought about my journey, my goal of being a CFO, it's like, what do you want to build when you go to be a CFO? Right? What are the skill sets you need? What's the hard skills? There's FP&A, there's IR, there's controllership, there's treasury, and there's tax. Unfortunately, controllership, I wasn't going to go get a CPA. I was really far down my career at that point. Treasury and tax, important skill sets. I dabbled a little bit in that, but I think you hire the right professionals, the ones that are really steeped in that expertise. And I've been a lifelong FP&A person, and I thought to myself, hey, is FP&A going to help me get to that next level? And I think it could have. But for me, I think the opportunity to do IR was just something so different than FP&A. When you're in FP&A, you know where the dead bodies are buried. You're challenging the business. It's a very internal focused. You're driving success. When you're dealing with external communications, it's a different language. It's about really understanding the needs of the buy side, the needs of the sell side, crafting a narrative, being that conduit from the company to Wall Street. It's just a completely different muscle. And
did you have to raise your hand for IR? Did you have to say, hey, I'd love to take on that?
Well, it's an interesting story. The person that was running IR at the time, I'd been working with him for many years. We were kind of partners in crime and going through our earnings and guidance processes. And both of us were sort of at inflection points. And we had the opportunity to swap roles. And so we ended up swapping roles. And I was very fortunate to have a CFO at the time that was willing to make that bet on us. And it was phenomenal. Again, one of the great people that I've had the opportunity to work for, the CFO at the time.
It's funny, the stars aligned where there's another individual who could see the value in doing that. And again, I have to believe it's not all that common to make that happen. So interesting.
Well, listen, I think it's a testament to the company. You go back to the serial monogamist, like the people, the opportunities, the innovation, what are those things? And so as I look back, I think I would have been successful if I'd gone for that opportunity. No doubt about it. But I felt that IR, I think, has just prepared me in a very different way. And I think to aspiring finance professionals out there, I encourage, I said earlier, every 2 to 3 years I was moving. And I spent a lot of time moving in FP&A. And if I was to go back to Genentech, I don't have regrets on my career path. I probably would have done a stint in Treasury just to have that experience and what the needs and then, what is it like to go through if you're raising bonds or going out to the debt markets or just broader capital markets. I probably would have done a couple of years there, even though as much as I loved FP&A, but really the importance of rotating and building out that skill set. And, Mark Hawkins, who's the CFO at the time at Salesforce, really gave me that opportunity. And it's an opportunity that I am incredibly appreciative of, just because I think it is, with the combination of FP&A and IR, I have a really, really unique skill set that not a lot of CFOs have, and not a lot of CFOs get to do that IR. It's a very small community. And many people are lifetime IR people because they love it. And just the opportunity to do that for a few years, I think, has really rounded me out and prepared me to become a CFO that I am today.
We like to ask our guests to reflect a little bit on the personal side for us. We're wondering if you have a personal habit or part of a daily routine that you're known for, something people point to. That's Evan. That's what he does. It might be something even a family member would point to us. It might be something that your work colleagues are unaware of, but a family member would say, do you know what he does?
I think my team, and I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, so let me preface it with that. I try and block time in the morning to clean out my emails and resolve things. I don't like people to be waiting on me. My team is waiting on me for a decision, or my peers are waiting for some input on a decision that needs to be made. And so I do spend some time when I have the block. It's either on the weekend when, my kids are off at an activity, or early. I'm an early riser, so I spend, 45 minutes to an hour cleaning out my inbox. Though you have to be really careful with that, finding those windows of time. I always like to say, I started doing this, and I was doing it on weekends and early mornings. And what I found was the team was getting up to respond to me at this time because they learned my habit. And one of my employees, who we had a great relationship, gave me some really important feedback. And they're like, hey, everyone's changing their schedules because of your habits. And I was like, okay, that's a really important piece of information to know. And I basically took that head on. I said, listen, I have a hectic work life. I have a hectic personal life with 2 kids and a dog. And so I find windows of time where I could sit and clean out emails. And that doesn't mean that you need to hop online on a Sunday afternoon when I'm cleaning out an inbox. And so what I've gotten into a habit of doing is I'm saying, this is not urgent, or this is not for weekend, or when it is urgent, I say, hey, this is urgent. We need to get on this. And I think that's one of I think the teams have really gotten used to me doing, so it doesn't blow up their life. Work-life balance is important. We all work really hard. We have a lot of type A's, but it's really about communicating those things. So I think that's sort of my thing. It's just like finding those times, not when I'm in meetings, but really addressing all those open items, but at the same time, ensuring that people don't necessarily react in what I would say suboptimal ways to when I find those windows.
Okay.
You know, I don't want people logging on a Sunday just because I'm cleaning out my inbox, unless it's an urgent request. Obviously, urgent trumps everything, but
The
just
context
because
you
I'm
brought,
sending it doesn't mean it's urgent.
the context you brought to that answer is what will give you a passable grade on it. But cleaning out your inbox, there have been one too many CFOs who say they clean out their inbox. So I'm
Yeah,
very
I had a
skeptical of
former
that.
boss. His inbox was like 30,000. I was like, that just made me anxious, right? I try and keep it pretty low. So
Just to reveal what I want that question to do is to really reveal something from the personal side. And I'm only sharing this because I thought you were curious. I failed again. I have to ask a question there. We want the podcast to help finance leaders make more connections than they ordinarily do in a lot of the media that they participate, which is the earnings call, is speaking to analysts. This is different. We want you to have people who, like that young auditor who wants to go work for Evan.
it's funny. Now that you describe it that way, I would probably have answered it a little bit differently. You know, it's about how I run my team, the importance of family. I'll tell you one of my core values is family, right? If I look at my three core values, and I'm really transparent about what this is, it's integrity, accomplishment, and family. Integrity is the sanctity of the data we provide, the accountability. Second is accomplishment. We got to get shit done. Like that's our job. And then the third piece is family. And family manifests itself in a lot of different ways. I find it super important. This is not a habit per se. It's sort of more, you might want to change it from a habit to like, that word makes you think of like what's something that's routine, but like when I think about like I make sure to celebrate people's birthdays. When people get engaged, we celebrate. Like I was hosting a holiday party at my house. That was a tradition I always had. I would ask all of my employees that were local, and then I would ask them to bring their spouse, their significant other, or a friend, because I'm asking a lot from my employees, and I want their significant others, their friends to realize the sacrifices that they're making and who they're making it for. And that was always sort of a tradition that I did. And that I think engendered a ton of goodwill and loyalty and just built a great culture. And one of the significant others of one of my employees, they had RSVP'd to my party that year. And then he'd written me a handwritten note, like in a card with an envelope, got it to me without going through his significant other, saying, hey, we're going to be canceling last minute because I'm going to be proposing to Alex. And she doesn't know, it's a surprise, but I just don't want you to worry. I'm like, oh, I'm so happy for you. This is awesome. And like, I was so proud, like I was showing everyone the card at the party because by that point she had been engaged, and she texted me that night. And so it's like those types of moments that I think are really important in how you build culture in an organization. So I don't know. Two thoughts on that. When I think habits, I think of like allocating time and to-do lists, right?
No, you're making an excellent point, and we gotta reformulate it. So thank you for that. Great answer too, by the way. We always like to ask if you have a book recommendation for us.
You know, it's interesting. I've read a lot of books. You can see the books behind me. Definitely read a lot of books. I think there's probably two that I've really found interesting. I think one is Influence Without Authority. It's written by Alan Cohen and David Bradford. And I'm not a big subscriber into sort of these management style books. I read them. I don't subscribe to like one theory. I try and glean different pieces from it. You know, and this book is really about, and it was really influential in the early part of my career when, you know, if you think about sort of the laws of power, right? When you're early in your career, many people don't think that they have power because they're low on the totem pole. And I would argue that actually you probably have a lot of power because you know what all the data is. You understand the data more. And as I've gotten farther in my career, I'm less connected to that data. And I've really relied on those people that not only understand the data, but the business context of that data. And so really it was about how do I influence without authority? And that is one of the books where the importance of, and maybe I liked it because there's a story in there where it talks about how do you connect with people? And they related it to sort of foreign currency, right? They're in one currency, you're in another, and you need to help find that right exchange rate. And for me, that has always been an important part when I go into a heightened moment where there's tension. Rather than just saying this is the right thing to do, I really like to understand what the person on the other side of the table is trying to do, and using questions and open-ended questions, directive questions, yes, no questions, to get a sense of what's important to them and finding a solution to whatever business challenge you're in. So I think that's one book that I think is really, I look back and I've actually given this book to a few people that I thought could benefit from it. And then the other book I would say that I just find super interesting is A Random Walk Down Wall Street. It's written by a Princeton professor, Burton Malkiel. I had the pleasure of meeting him when I was in college. And it's efficient market theory, and it's a highly debated topic and different things. But what I really loved about this book is it talked about bubbles in the markets and just a little bit of historical context of what that means. And there's a famous time where the tulip bubble, I don't know whether you know that story, or that there was a tulip craze many years, hundreds of years ago, where people were spending an inordinate amount of money on tulip bulbs, right? And the complexity of the colors and the flower, and then the whole bubble fell apart, right? Not shocking, right? You're buying flowers or bubbles, and I think it's helped drive some rational thought when I think about the markets. When I think like what's going on today in the markets, right? It's somewhat irrational in many ways. You're seeing valuations that are down to levels we haven't seen in 15 years. And so it was just really thoughtful about how to be rational and how to think through things and not to try and eliminate some of the emotion and to really focus on what's controllable and what's not controllable, right? As I think about where Seismic is going today, my goals of this company is to help it scale, help it grow, and when the time is right, be a public company ready, regardless of when that happens. You got to stay focused and not get wrapped up in the emotion of those things. And so 2 books I've just really enjoyed, and I get to read every
Great
now
selections for us. I thought you were going to answer my last question, which is which you began to do, I think. We always end with asking you to share your CFO priorities for the coming 12 months. What would be yours?
Yeah. Well, it's what those I just said. I think the number one thing is helping drive growth through scale. That's the number one thing. I think Seismic is incredibly positioned with a huge TAM opportunity. We are the dominant player in the market, being number one in software matters. We are in that position now. We are evolving into a full, robust platform to solve the enablement needs and multiple personas. I just think it's a unique time for the company. And my role as CFO is to help scale that growth. And how do we do that? And when the time is right, be a public company, be public ready when the markets allow themselves to, and when our investors want us to. And so those are the priorities for me in building that out. Thankfully, I walked into a situation where I think a lot of those pieces are in place, and it's just about building on those, and really excited for the future of Seismic and where we're going to go.
Evan Goldstein, thank you for joining us on CFO Thought Leader.
All right, thank you so much.
Hello, listeners. Do us a favor. Be certain to subscribe to CFO Thought Leader on Apple Podcasts, or if you're an Android user, check us out on Spotify or Google Play. If you like the show, please recommend it to a friend.